Okay, fantastic. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And I will pass to each of our speakers to kick us off. So what they'll be doing is maybe sharing a little bit more about who they are, the school that they represent, but also who they are outside of that. This is as much a representation of each of these really five really interesting and fascinating folks that it is about, the places, the institutions that they represent, of course. So I'll pass to Chantal to kick us off first.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I do have, I guess, the format that Anne had shared with us, so I'm just going to be looking at that whilst I'm speaking to you to make sure that I cover it all. So yes, I'm Chantal Liu. I'm a cultural worker and a rogue archivist from Southern Africa. I'm currently based in London. I work with School of Comments, or SOC, alongside our director, Maria Hildebrand. I'm not sure if she's here. My colleagues, Amy, who I saw, is with us today. She's based in Rotterdam. Gabriel, who's based between Berlin and Zagreb, and Yelena, who is in Zurich. School of Commons itself is a community-based peer learning initiative that takes place mostly online, and we're based and hosted at the Zurich University of the Arts. It was birthed over a conversation at lunch. Because of the frustrations and the limitations of the university, I suppose. The structure itself changes each year with each new cohort. But we hope to explore through School of Commons how people can learn together by organizing themselves through sharing questions, knowledges, and resources as a community instead of following a top-down approach. Since we started, School of Commons has supported over 150 projects, bringing together people from across ages, different places, disciplines, and backgrounds. Our open call is open globally, and really it's trying to remove the barriers of what their process looks like. So we don't ask for CVs or portfolios, or we don't require any formal qualifications, and the review process is anonymous. So the selection is based on the ideas and the curiosity, not the credentials. Each year, depending on our budget, we're able to select between 14 and 25 projects through this peer-led process. Each receives a small budget of 1,500 Swiss francs that goes towards production, travel to Zurich for our one and only in-person gathering, plus workshops, mentorship, and community support. We usually work with around 30 to 50 people each year, depending. This is, single projects or collective projects or duos. And our community network extends to about 350 members at the moment. This includes collaborators, past participants, contributors to the program of the year, all staying connected through talks, reading groups, and informal gatherings. At School of Commons, we've learned that studying, making, and living together are all connected, that art, attention, ecology, and technology shape how we learn together. Our 10-month program has two main parts, one designed and supported by our team, and the other designed entirely by the participants. Both are rooted in collaboration and care. Through this hybrid and peer learning process, we've also realized that what truly sustains the space isn't just funding or digital tools, it's trust, it's openness, and it's kind of ongoing collaborative, collective care and maintenance. For us, learning is both an artistic and ecological practice, a living experiment of connection where technology helps to make accessible real, and where study becomes an act of care and of solidarity and of shared attention. Right. So my own pathway into this work has come through architecture and design and cultural practice. I studied communications and branding. Whilst I was still a student, I started working at Zaha Hadid at a time where her work was often described as paper architecture because they believed her designs were too radical to be built. I joined her practice during a period of huge growth. Um, this experience really sort of shaped what I thought about architecture as social practice, as social art, and as a way of expanding what's possible. Before I joined School of Commons, I was working with a South African architect, Sumaya Valley at Counterspace in Johannesburg, and now based here. And the practice explored hybrids, or still explores hybrid identities and spatial conditions across African and Islamic worlds through design, research, pedagogy, and built work. All of this to say, those experiences taught me a lot about structure, about access, and about visibility, and how inherited systems continue to reproduce exclusion, whether through institutional hierarchies or more subtle forms of taxonomic violences. The ways in which classification, language, and decide to okay. Yeah, decides who's seen, who's named, who's remembered. Over time, I've become increasingly interested in how spaces at the periphery respond to these gaps that are left behind by these inherited systems. Spaces where access is more open, new forms of learning can emerge, and where different kinds of knowledge can circulate more freely. So that's me.
Thanks so much, Chantel. Next, we'll pass to Peter.
Right on. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Schmidt, and I'm here with the Strother School of Radical Attention. We're a small nonprofit. We're based in Brooklyn. I'm in Brooklyn right now. And what we do as a school is attention activism, by which we mean the collective movement to push back against the ways that our attention has been commodified by the tech industry, by the so-called attention economy. So we're a response to the harms of the attention economy, but we're a response in an affirmative world building key. It's not just about kind of diagnosing what's wrong with tech. It's about, okay, when we set aside our devices for a moment, what's the world that we want to build together? And what traditions do we want to draw on? That's what makes us a school. In terms of how the school got started, the story goes back to about 2018 at the Sao Paulo Biennial in Brazil, where a bunch of artists converged on Sao Paulo for a week of events around the theme of attention. So these were artists who all had different relationships to practices of attention, to trance practices, as that was like kind of their medium. And they spent a week discussing the aesthetics of attention, the practice of attention, its role in art history. And they did so under the kind of growing shadow of the election of Jair Bolsonaro, who had been elected about 2 weeks prior. And so this was right around the time that the world was beginning to understand the effects of like Cambridge Analytica and the manipulation of Facebook data on elections in Turkey, Brazil, and Poland, in the US soon it would turn out. And at the conclusion of the week, at a kind of final conference, people said, wait a second, we might not even have a conference. We might not even have a biennial next time. We have to think seriously about the politics of attention, not just about attention as a kind of exquisite aesthetic category that we explore with our friends in gallery spaces. And so out of that kind of tense conversation came a coalition called the Friends of Attention, which is the parent coalition of the school. There's people all over the world. They meet on Zoom calls like this once a month. And our stated mission is to advance forms of attention that resist commodification and make us free. And so we really believe in a kind of diversity of attentional forms. Around 2022, the Friends, many of whom, as you might have guessed, are educators, school people, developed a curriculum that they called the Attention Lab. That was a curriculum to be put out into the world to prompt conversations about attention and to prompt practices of joint durational attention. So we're using our attention We're doing it over time, and we're doing it together, and we're learning from it as a way of kind of arming ourselves kind of peacefully against the effect of these systems. I got involved right around then. I was helping to, I'm sorry, one sec. I was helping to facilitate those workshops, and those workshops grew, and we started meeting with a kind of audience, and we found that there was an enormous demand for this kind of thing. So in 2023, we decided, hey, this wants to be something bigger, and we called it the School of Radical Attention. We named it after Matthew Strother, a friend of attention who had recently died from cancer at a young age. And since then, our job has just been to deliver on this promise of a school of radical attention. So, what we do is we draw on various traditions from the art world, from the world of scholarship, the humanities, from political movement work, and from spiritual traditions, because we think all of those traditions represent repositories of attentional wisdom. They teach us about what our minds and senses can do, and how they can bring us together, and how they can make the world a richer place more amenable to flourishing. And so we are taking those traditions and kind of turning them to the light of our present moment, where an extraordinarily powerful industry has figured out ways to invade our kind of most intimate parts of ourselves. Um, and we're thinking about, what we can learn from these traditions, these practices, and how they can help us both protect ourselves from that system, but more importantly, like, create something beautiful together. So in practice, the school, we have a space in Dumbo. Y'all are welcome to come by anytime you're in Brooklyn. We have lots of public programming. We have a seminar programming. So we have people sitting around tables at this moment, we have 10 or so 3-week seminars per trimester. We have public attention lab workshops where we have 30 people sitting in a circle of chairs doing practices of attention and facilitated discussions over the course of 3 hours. We have pop-up study groups throughout the city and across the country increasingly. And we work with teachers. So we have a national network of teachers called Educators for Attention, who are thinking about how they can respond to the attention crisis in their classrooms. That's the work that we do. We call it attention activism. And maybe I'll hold fire on the next part, but we're very interested in the ways that this work can spread, and also in thinking about all of these alternative schools out there in the world that y'all are doing as very real allies in our mission. Because anytime you bring people together for a school, Chantel said that you used the word attention several times already. It's a way of intentionally sharing attention in a kind of world building key. And so that's what we do. That's why I'm here. Thanks for having me in.
Thanks so much, Peter. Next, we'll pass on to Mark.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Robner Jackson. I'm at LungA School, an Icelandic folk high school, art school, artwork, performance, or situation in Seyðisfjörður in East Iceland, the other side of Iceland from Reykjavik. So we're a very remote town that's connected to perhaps the rest of Europe through the fjord from which a ferry goes every week, and connected to the rest of Iceland via a single road over the mountain. And I'm kind of stressing that aspect of the school because the school is very much tied to Seyðisfjörður, where we are, and part of its conditions and part of its particular engagement with ideas of learning and knowledge and art making is tied to the town. So we're spread throughout the town, and we use a lot of the spaces that become unused outside of the busy summer season when the town is a tourist destination. Also, we use some spaces, or we're given some spaces, given access to spaces that have been left from the decline in the fishing industry, which historically is what Seyðisfjörður is part of. And we're not not here to use up these spaces, but to make them used and to allow them to be alive in some way or other. And the school comes from a connected history. The originally in about 1999, 2000, some teenagers in the town wanted to set up a art and music festival, and that became the LungA Festival, which ran for many years, 25 years. And the festival around I think it was around 2013, started to open up opportunities for an art school to become part of the environment of Seyðisfjörður. The festival ran in the summer, whereas the art school runs in the fall and in the spring. So part of the organizers of the festival then started the art school as a separate proposition, but which had certain things in common. There's a certain festival ethos that carries through the practice of the school, and the school is runs 2 programs a year, sometimes more, depending upon what we're able to do. The programs are 84 days in duration and invite 18 to 20 participants at each time to the school to live here, to make work together, to create a community, and to live amongst the town and be part of the town. And it's very much connected to other traditions, such as the Danish folk high school and the Scandinavian folk high school system. And part of its, I suppose, intensity is around some of the historical interests of those schools. But at the same time, it's very much connected to perhaps some of the things Chantal was talking about as well, a program that builds itself, that's different each time. And we invite artists and makers. I mean, we work with local knowledge in Seyðisfjörður and East Iceland to create an environment in which the participants of the school can determine what the school is for them. And the school takes place obviously weekends as well as during the week, but the week is the emphasis on morning gatherings, on workshop weeks, on practice weeks. And there's no qualification, and there's no set deadlines for any exams or anything like that. And the school was very much created to refuse the instrumentalization of education, or refuse to be an instrument in a system of production that I think a lot of the people who come to the school are familiar with in other educational systems. And like most of the folk high schools, it's very much about, the school really is about living together, living with other people, and developing community and shared interests and what might come out of that. And I came to the school from something which I might probably talk about, we're going to talk about later, but I come from both higher education, teaching higher education in the UK, being involved in universities in the UK, and also being involved as a curator in an art world. I'm an artist curator. And so my interests perhaps in the LungA School are colored a little bit like that. I think we all see the school very differently. That's really, I suppose, the summary of it. The school recently had some slight changes in programming. The art program is very much the historical part of the school, but we've been working with land programs, particularly emphasizing interactions between participants and Iceland and people who inhabit the town, and local knowledge ideas, and how we might share and be part of the town in a way that's not as extractive as perhaps other situations might lend themselves to. And we've also started working a lot with radio. We started a radio station, or there's a radio station housed in the school called Seyðisfjörður Community Radio, which has developed into a radio school, which is currently running until the end of the year.
Thank you so much, Mark. I feel like with each introductions, it really feels like your histories, your backgrounds, your schools have so many threads that connect all of them. And there's also so many more questions that I personally would want to ask all of you based on your introductions alone. So it's going to be a struggle for me to rein myself in to not take us on all these different directions. Next, we'll pass to Rachel.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rachel Uwa, and I'm from School of Machines, Making and Make-Believe, which is based in Berlin. Trying not to be nervous. I was like camera off, trying to breathe deeply in and out. Yeah, thanks, Ben. So I started the school in 2014. after having been an organizer for meetups and various kinds of events and things. Yeah, I mean, okay, I didn't prepare here. And I hate when people say I didn't prepare, because then you're like, well, why am I here listening to this unprepared person? But like, I don't know. I just thought like I will just be real and say whatever's on in my brain in the moment when I'm speaking. So I think maybe I will, usually when I give a talk, I kind of start from the beginning, like who I am and where I'm from. So I'm originally from Texas, but I've been living in Berlin for 20 years. And I also like to tell people that I come from a basically super fucked up background. Like my childhood was really not at all a kind of childhood anybody should have. But I think it's important to say this because I feel like, you know, we're kind of sitting in front of you in a way that's like as if we're like here and we've had, you know, like I don't know. I just feel like in general in life, the feeling is like people who've had good lives accomplish things in the end. But I just want to say, like, also people who don't have a very good start to things can also work through all of the bullshit and still do good things in the world. So yeah, I think that's an important thing. And so School of Machines is basically I kind of say it's like hovering at the intersection of art, technology, design, and human connection because, well, the human connection is really the main thing. You know, I mean, I started the school, like I said, many years ago, and then I was always just thinking, okay, what's interesting now? So at first it was like, okay, physical computing and creative coding, but then I was like, oh, fabrication is fascinating, and you know, AR is fascinating, VR is fascinating, drones. And so like I kind of started to just develop programs around the things that were interesting in this moment and how those things reflect our human experience. So for example, like one of my favorite examples is like with the augmented reality. You know, I wanted to do a class on augmented reality and I was like, well, it's so super, it's like such, at such a superficial stage. I was like, what about it? You know? And then I was talking with a friend who was like, but what about reality? And I was like, okay, perfect. So using technology as a way to question who we are and what we care about. So the course itself was called Reality question mark. And so you could kind of come in and start off with like, okay, what is reality? And reality is obviously different for each of us. And so the point is like to kind of bring people around questions about the world and questions that we have about ourselves and each other, and then to basically bring people in through technology, but then to start to talk about who we are and what we care about. And then I think, you know, the other day I had a visitor from Turkey who came by with his wife, and I was trying, you know, he was telling me about like the work that he's doing and talking about like technology and things. And I was like, well, the thing is, like, I think we know by this point, like technology is not going to save any of us. In fact, it's obviously going into the other direction at the moment. So like dystopia is here. But the thing I think is most important for me in the classes that I'm designing, and when I'm working with like past students and things who also design classes with me now, is so, you know, like people come in and they're like, I want to make this thing that represents this thing, you know, and then as we're working through the process, then, you know, when I see the work, I'm like, this is great work, but like you said you wanted to do this thing. And so I think like most of my job is kind of trying to help people get from the thing that they want to do and where they're at, and like kind of the steps to go and actually do the thing that they want to produce that is going to express something real about them, something deeper about them and the things that they care about. And so just practically speaking, originally when I started the school, I was running 4-week full-time programs. And so I've done a program, I did most of my programs are in Germany, but I also did a program in Italy with Arduino at the Arduino facilities, and in China, and in Ireland, and in Belgrade. And so that was like my favorite part about the school, like, you know, being able to travel and like, you know, for 4 weeks at a time and like discover new places with new people. And then since COVID, we've also been running online classes. So we try to do online classes in the spring and fall, and then summer 4-week full-time classes. I definitely would still love to travel with the school. That's the thing I would love to start up again. So if anybody, I saw David from Ireland is here, and he's the one who brought me into that project. So like if any of you are here and you're like, oh, we should bring a project into our wherever you are, please, I would love to talk about that. And also just to say that also like originally getting more women into these kinds of places was, I mean, into technology was really important to me. So I definitely focused on having more women, having more underrepresented groups, and supporting people who are not usually the face of technology. And currently we have a new space upstairs, and we're developing it into a studio and a community space. So it runs on community membership. And I'm also working on a new project called School of Humans. And the idea being that there are so many things about being like, so, you know, with School of Machines, I've kind of been trying to like say, look at technology. And then they come in, I'm like, okay, let's talk about what the hell's going on. But with School of Humans, I'm like, there's too many things about being human that we never get to learn, like how to give a damn about ourselves, how to give a damn about others. And I think, you know, a lot of times we're talking about the environment, but like people don't give a damn about themselves. They're not going to pay attention to the environment. So in my mind, like the real activism is trying to get people to really understand who they are and to kind of work through like why they matter. And that is kind of like the foundation and the starting point for everything. And I also saw like, you know, former students here and like also like, you know, when I had scholarships for like the 4-week classes, for example, I've never had funding. You know, I had funding for one project, but that was like, you know, it was like not proper funding. And, but you know, so like I gave this person a scholarship and then she stayed with me, you know, and then we got to bond for a month and like really get to know each other. And like, so it's just very grassroots. I'm just saying, like, I don't or sponsoring me or like any kind of support whatsoever. And I do this work because I want to see humans evolve before I die. I want to evolve before I die. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Yet again, another voice in this kind of chorus of different like experiences, both personal and professional, and all of these questions kind of tying to each other in so many different ways. Benjamin, you'll close us off with the introductions.
Hey, well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. I think it's the first time that we have this gathering, and I think it's really exciting. So normally it's me and Dasha, Elena, who's a co-director, and we've been doing this together from the start, but she couldn't be here today. So I just want to shout out to Dasha. So No School in Nevers, No School Never, is an artist-run nonprofit. I mean, a lot of the things that you will say, I think, align with what we do. We started in 2018. Well, the first was 2019, and then COVID got on the way, but we managed to continue. So it's artist-run. We try to kind of bring both our practices and interests. So I'm, I guess, more focused on the material and plant obsolescence and e-waste and all kind of the kind of physical impact of technology, and Dasha has a more sociological, human-centered practice. So I think it's a good balance. I should say also that when we started with Dasha, she just graduated from school. She was a student. She was only 22. I just turned 40. So I think it was also nice that we have this age difference because it brings a very diverse perspective. I used to work when I met Dasha at the New School, so there was a bit of a also fuck you creating New School. I also was inspired by the School for Poetic Computation. I actually talked to Tae and Cho before starting No School. Even Rachel, we met at a party in Berlin. We had a chat. I don't know if she remembers, but I also come from organizing. I was based in Dublin for 10 years. I did a lot of things there, running the Dublin Art and Technology Association data and doing a lot of workshops. So I think this really informed No School also. But doing it in Nevers, in Burgundy, in the countryside, was also kind of both a decision that I realized later was very important. I think it was practical at first because it was easier, cheaper, but now I realize that it's quite unique to be in the countryside in a small city. And we also don't really have any selection process. Whoever wants to come. We take the first person that sign up, basically, which means we have this incredible mix of people every year, coming from all over Asia, Europe, US, Canada, South America. I mean, it's quite incredible. We invite nearly as many, if not more, guests than participants. So it's not exactly a business model that's very viable, but it's actually amazing for the community and the connections. Because I see it as also a way of creating this community, supporting our community of artist, maker, hacker, whatever you call it. So we are paying everyone, try to pay them well. I think working in Dublin for many years taught me how to do stuff without kind of funding or whatever. So I think we do have some funding now, but not a lot. Mostly for the festival. So there's a festival in parallel to the summer school. So no school is 2 weeks in summer in July. And then we have a closing festival, which is also more talks, more performances, more stuff happening. Yeah, so we try to think about this together, the impact of technology on the environment, on us as people, thinking in a kind of decolonial perspective on ecologies, making tools, creating with technology, not just, so like, Stigler talked about this pharmacon, kind of the both being a disease and a poison and a medicine. So I guess we have this in mind also when we make things. So there's a lot of live coding, for example. And we've also done some residency outside kind of event. We get sometimes invited by other people to run things. And yeah, this is kind of how we operate. The No School is more about I guess, anti-capitalist or kind of a different perspective on technology from whatever the Silicon Valley is pushing down our throat than being against education. So it's really, we do a lot of education or teaching and sharing, but I think, yeah, we try to do it in a horizontal manner. So people who come and participate very often are also teaching at some point during the 2 weeks or sharing something, and that's very important to us. Yeah, I think that's kind of that in terms of, yeah, I should mention we have also a team of people who really make it possible during the 2 weeks. So Vincent, who's based in Nevers and is an amazing artist, botanist, and technician. He builds exhibition for a living, so that's really helped. Ade, Xavier, Madden, and Caro were also like on the team, and I just, yeah, need to mention them. That's it.
Thank you so much, Jean-Janine. And I think it's so interesting to hear about I think also not only the personal experiences that brought people to the schools and the organizations that they work with, but also the geographies that you all draw from, whether it's hyper local, like in Mark's case, really integrating with the communities that you're part of, whether it's globally drawn in terms of participants, as Benjamin was just saying, like these all really show a kind of constellation of, I think, both the places where folks come from, but all the places that folks are feeding into, which is really, really interesting. I think actually feeds into the first question that we have for folks, which is really, what is your relationship to legacy um, institutions? And at first, I think when I was thinking through this question, it was legacy institutions in terms of education, but actually, there are many different legacies that we can think of. Legacies in terms of the industries that were in the towns that you're based in. It's legacies in terms of the educational institutions you come from. It can be technology companies that you all push back against, as Peter's case, as Rachel's case, as Benjamin's case, as you all were saying. It could be the university that the school was started in response to, as I know Chantel was talking about, based in Zurich originally. And so, yeah, I think that is maybe something to kick us off together, which is really what your relationship to these legacy institutions are. So maybe to just get started, I'll pass us back to the first sort of order, starting with Chantel.
Yeah, where to start? I mean, our relationship with School of Commons is it's precarious, it's messy, it's complicated. Sometimes it's collaborative. It's usually quite confrontational. Yeah, I mean, we're hosted at the university. We're part funded by the university. Yeah, we operate on its periphery, really. So I think using that proximity allows us to ask harder questions about power, about access, about authorship. Yeah, I mean, it's when I was thinking this through, also just thinking about kind of my personal relationship to this and the institution itself, and how that, at least where I'm placed right now, is also changing. You know, the concept of the institution is changing, and trying to think about that, and you know, the attention that I place on that, and the attention that we place on that as a school or as an initiative, or you know, I think is, yeah, it's complicated and it's tricky sometimes. I think one of the ways that we've tried to counter that with School of Commons is through our selection process. It's, you know, it's anonymous, it's peer-led. Yeah, sort of trying to counter the gatekeeping that kind of usually defines the academic admissions. I think in that as well, it asks a lot, you know. We ask a lot of ourselves, of the cohort, or of our participants, because we are all sort of navigating that, you know. We're all navigating that relationship, how our proximity to it, how it affects us. But yeah, just I think in a way, the how to shift the doing, you know, how can we shift the doing so that it feels more community specific, so that, you know, that we do have the community that's part of our process. So in a way, our process, yeah, I mean, it's really, I wanted to have a really nice tidy answer for this, but it's really complicated. It's really frustrating. It's really exhausting. But I think at the same time, it's quite an exciting time to see how value has shifted. And I think being able to sit with that and draw from that is what kind of helps to to counter a lot of the pushback that we get. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, I first encountered School of Commons as a participant, the same as Gabe and Amy, who's here, in 21. And it really shifted my thinking of learning as a commons, and the potential and the power of that. As something that we co-hold, you know, rather than something that's extracted or kind of conferred. And when Maria asked me to join the team, I, you know, sort of just thinking about what I could bring to School of Commons, you know, like how can I use what I've learned navigating or negotiating institutions, whether it's art, whether it's architectural, whether it's, you know, what can I bring to School of Commons? And we started talking about this, you know, that we needed to be more visible, that we need, you know, like that we needed to present in a certain way, that we, you know, that, and when I started, so I was asked to join the team to help with developing and delivering the new website and branding. And I think that really, thinking about the project that I was doing at School of Commons, the sort of like parthood or pothole systems, and how I could feed that into the website that we would, you know, that we were going to be using to treat that as a resource for all of us. So Yeah, I don't know. Shall I share the website? I don't know. It was thinking about, what kind of resources are we needing here? How can we start thinking about the knowledge that we're generating through this process, and trying to create more of a kind of horizontal space for it to be engaged, but also a network for it to be, seen as connected. So sort of part, whole systems, and sort of relationships of knowledge, and how we could start to supplement and expand on these ideas of knowledge. And I think in a way, it helped me to find my place in School of Commons, in the my proximity to the university or to an institution that I feel, having gone through a really formalized design, education route, there was a lot that I was missing. There was a lot that I felt was lacking, like the language, to even think and to place and to situate my thinking was lacking. So I think it's, yeah, it's relational. But yeah, it's frustrating. And I think sometimes you sort of find yourself, or we find ourselves with a lot of space to fill. And then sometimes it's really frustrating and like really constricting and really, and if anything, it sort of just taught us that it's sort of reinforced how we model the school, that we rely on the feedback of participants to shape it, to shape the 10 months that we have together. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. I think that there's the notion that schools are ultimately relational is perhaps one of the most foundational learnings that we can get from being in an educational environment, whether it's the relationships, the complicated ones between institutions, but also between participants, as you say, really happens with the School of Commons. Um, I know I'll pass to Peter next, and maybe just for the sake of time, just a flag for folks. If you want to, we might split up maybe some of the questions where some answer this one and some might answer our next one. And we might bleed into Q&A time, but I feel like there's so much to discuss here that it would make sense to keep going with the panel. So just to flag that, Peter, I'll pass to you next.
Great, thank you. So the question of legacy institutions. My first instinct when I hear that phrase is to think about universities. And we are on an anti-university panel, so we've kind of set ourselves up to be in relation to that question. And we at the School of Radical Attention don't have any formal affiliation with universities. So we're not like hosted by them. We don't get money from them. And a lot of our faculty teach at universities. They're like professors or lecturers. So many of the folks who come through our doors are folks who went to university, who went to college, or your local arts college, kind of art school, are now living in the big bad world in New York City and are seeking to return to a place that centers learning, centers inquiry, centers those kinds of traditions. I would say that we as a school respond at the level of method to where universities are at right now. So one of the big themes is accessibility, of course, and affordability. The just kind of obscene price of higher ed in the US has occasioned a strong push towards like alternative schools that can create these spaces where you don't have to take out student loans. A lot of our programming is free. Most of our programming is free, actually. And anybody can kind of walk in off the street and join us. And we also, in our pedagogical work, so we're like, the School of Radical Attention, we do attention activism, but, we're a school, so we're interested in questions of pedagogy, are pushing back against a view of school that is, as Mark said, kind of instrumentalized, that is concerned with like outputs, production, cognitive outputs, which at this point machines can seem to be able to do just as well as we can. And our emphasis is on experience and on the experience of attention and on what happens when we share attention together and sort of take our experience of attention to texts, to works of art, to questions, to physical environments, to other people as the entry point into like inquiries that teach us about ourselves and how to live together. At the level of method, we actually think the universities have kind of lost the plot with this like market economy of prestige academic production. We're like, what does it feel like to be human? Let's think about that together and let's feel through that together. But you know, I can't trash universities too hard. I came from one. So many of us came from one, and I think we have a sense of what's possible because we've been in those spaces, and perhaps we're left unsatisfied by them in different ways, or at least saw their shortcomings. So I think it's important to credit universities with making like legible or conceivable a desire that they can't necessarily satisfy. And so we think of the School of Radical Attention, and we tend to think of all these other schools out there as para-institutional, which is sort of like next to, in relation to the bigger institutions. We're not trying to put Yale out of business necessarily, but we do think that we fulfill a role that Yale cannot fulfill. They've got the $17 billion research budget. We've got a nice little space and some cool people. We're much nimbler than they are. And so, you know, we think of the education world as an ecological space, right? And like you need the big mammals, and then you need the little ones and everything in between. And so we kind of envision a more diverse ecology of school spaces with the small nimble ones and the big ones. And we think that's really the future that we're trying to see. And I think the community that we have on this call and all the folks that are tuning in are evidence to the fact that we're starting to see a kind of proliferation of new niches and new schools doing different stuff, and hopefully all contributing to like human life, if such a thing could be said.
Love that. And I love how building off of the relational symbolism, this ecosystems approach to education, thinking about the universities as these kind of big mammals, but also the like other parts of the ecosystem that actually lend it life, that may be smaller in size, but are just as important. Maybe I would think of would artist-run schools be like the moss, the forest floor that actually keeps things running and moving forward?
Mhm.
Mark, I'll pass to you next.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a really juicy question for me, I think, because there is like, I suppose, a desire at LungA School to imagine ourselves outside of or away from the structures of institutions, and particularly of legacy institutions. And yet, of course, we're entangled with all of these things and these systems, and some of those are incredibly important to us, and some of them are things we want to try and resist. And um, so, for example, we are part funded by the Ministry of Education in Iceland. It's something that became possible a few years ago as a Icelandic folk high school, and that obviously brings with it certain baggage and frictions, perhaps, but also it allows us to create the school that we want to be part of. And also we come to the school as participants from these legacy institutions. A lot of us, like the other schools, have been to other universities, or maybe have been to folk high schools, or are coming to the institution from coming to LungA School from an idea of the artist residency as an artist involved in an institution, and bringing those ways of being and ways of making and ways of engaging with knowledge to LungA School. And so each time there's a program, it's formulated from, I suppose, a gathering together of relations to institutions. And there's also, of course, like I said earlier, the connection to the town, and how there's a lot of work going on in the town around for example, Scalaness Nature Reserve, or the provision of food for the town during the summer months that then becomes a question of the provision of food for the school during the winter and spring. That although aren't the kinds of legacy institutions we've been talking about thus far, are incredibly ingrained in the living situation in the east of Iceland. So we're entangled with those as well, and I think part of it is kind of being aware of that and acknowledging it. I find it difficult also to think of the alternative art school as an alternative, a little bit like what Peter was saying, alternative to the university or academia. But I think the school, LungA School, because of its closeness to some of those cultures and some of those ways of behaving, does sometimes attempt to find its way to set itself up as an alternative to those things, or use thought experiments to allow ourselves to differentiate from those systems. So they are very, very entangled. And the history of the Danish Folk High School, for example, that is running through LungA School because of the way it was set up and the way that it's enacted, does have certain questions that we reprise every program, about how we work together and what we're doing together. But I think what we're all talking about in some degree here is how projects we're involved in are focused on living together with other people, as opposed to gaining a piece of paper or a qualification. And that's at the heart of the Danish folk high school system, as well as being at the heart of projects like LungA School. So the real school is living together and sharing food. The real school is teaching each other across any assumptions of hierarchy and being participant in that, rather than, I suppose, the structures that we occasionally invite in and occasionally resist that get in the way of those interactions.
It makes me think of my own experience, actually, as a fellow of the School of Commons in the past year, where we had a meeting, this kind of annual meeting that Chantal had already talked about, where all of the participants were able to gather together. And I remember in the kind of food desert of Zurich on a Sunday, and all of Switzerland really on a Sunday, if you want to go grab something from the supermarket, we managed to like scavenge together, maybe between 5 or 6 of us, different food that we could share between us for lunch. And I remember someone very explicitly saying, like, this is the real school. Like, this meal is the real school, or it's really the time when we're able to break bread together. Quite literally, we managed to scavenge maybe 2 or 3 different loaves, and learn from each other in that process. And so really spoke to my own experience as someone who was as a participant. I can imagine for the other organizers as well. I know this is a super difficult, tricky question. I actually feel like it'd be important to maybe talk about legacy institutions. So I'm going to back up what I had said before, and maybe before speeding on to the second one, would love to pass the mic to Rachel or Benjamin. Do you have like a response or an interest in responding to this, question of, what is your relationship to legacy institutions? Maybe what would you like it to be?
Yeah, I think I would. I'm very torn by, so I went to university for 7 years, but I didn't graduate in the end because I already had 3 jobs in the field that I was studying at the time. So I thought like, okay, I'll just be one of those people who, succeeds despite having not finished university. And then, most of the fields I was working in, it was around like audio. I worked in audio and then visual effects, and it's around what is your portfolio? What can you do? What are your skills? Not like, what is your paper? Like, what does your paper say or whatever? So, and then these days with politics the way it is, I feel like universities more or less, I mean, especially in the US or like maybe the UK, like places where it's very expensive, because in Germany it's more or less free depending on where you go. But I feel like they've kind of proven that they don't give a damn about the students, actually. It's all about the money for them, like with the way that they call the cops on protests and like all these like just ridiculous stories. And so in my mind, I just wish actually that there was kind of a revolt, and I wish that so many people would have been like, you know what, screw you people, and then like take their money out of the university system. And then what are they going to do when they have no money left? Because they, you know what I mean? I think then they're going to stop calling the cops on their protesting students, and like various other things. So in my mind, I would love to gather with people and rethink university or rethink education in like a kind of longer term space. And like, what could that actually look like when we're actually putting the focus on like humans and what humans need to know in order to survive this ridiculous world. And yeah, I guess I'll just stop there.
Okay, I go next, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar in a way that I'm teaching in many university and school right now, so I'm always in and out. I did apply, well, right now for the third time to potentially do a PhD, and I'm in the process right now. And then I realized after it didn't work out the first two times, I was like, maybe I don't really want a PhD. I want to be with people and talk about my work. And I'm sure there's other people. So I think there was this idea of like creating a space that doesn't exist that's not completely outside, but inside, and also kind of when you're out on your own, you don't really have a lot of people to talk about your stuff, maybe your friends and family, I'm sure, but they don't necessarily care or interested. So I think there was that. Like, I'm sure there's other people like me who want this kind of space for, just sharing and being challenged and ask questions. So I think there was that. So and a bit of frustration because I worked for an American university to see the cost and what I could do with that space. And I was like, I can offer as much in 2 weeks than in a semester. And they pay so much money. So that was kind of that also. So kind of a learning from it and at the same time trying to build something a bit different. But I do think it's not necessarily in opposition, but maybe in addition to what's possible. And I'm still actually right now in the process of potentially doing a PhD. So I'm not completely away from this concept of education or being back in university. I do like the challenge and the experience. But yeah, so that was kind of that. And we do actually do a graduation ceremony at no school around 5 a.m. during the after party of the end of 2 weeks, where we were super high and drunk and give people like paper. And that's the best graduation ceremony you can find, I think.
Uh, I love that. And I think you both also in your answers really identify building up again this like notion that it's all relational, that it's complicated, that it's entangled. What happens when that ecosystem is unhealthy, as Rachel pointed out, when it's extractive. And what happens on the other hand, Benjamin, when you're taking those formats and turning it like taking those rituals like the graduation and turning them into something else entirely, that perhaps something so much more meaningful, if anything, if they're able to remember it later on. Um, with that in mind, we'll head to our next question, which is really around how do you sustain the school? And for folks tuning in today, this was a really complicated question to ask because to sustain a school, we already find ourselves talking about discussions around funding, who is funded, who is not, how do you sustain a school monetarily? But we really wanted to ask this question in an expansive sense, like what does it mean to sustain the school? And this can go beyond resources of like monetary resources to the people that make the school possible, to the space, to the town, to the digital environment and digital tools that make remote schools possible, remote meetings possible, like this one that we're in today. You can take this question as in whatever directions that you would like, but we are really trying to think in an expansive notion around what sustaining a school like this might look like. But also, it could be, get the bag. That could be the answer. It's really dependent on your context. Maybe we'll cycle back into the format. It feels like we're kind of going in these like circumambulations around the group. So I'll pass it back to Chantal.
Hmm. Poof. Yeah, it's not just financial. We've spoken a lot about the relational aspect of this, which is foundational. It's infrastructural. It's epistemic. I was just responding to a question in the text, and yeah, I think again, it's our kind of proximity to these things, to these what sometimes feels like quite a monolithic, yeah, Something that really shifted, or it was a bit of a moment of just this is not it anymore, is during the pandemic. Sorry, I've kind of gone off a little bit here, and I just wanted to mention this because it was a really powerful moment for me, and how I think about what sustains me in sustaining this work. That during Brexit here, there was this moment I sort of happened upon a talk at a organization called Autograph here, and they just digitized a massive archive, and it was called The Missing Chapter. And the talk was to teachers, to educators, on how to navigate this question of how did we get here, that was being asked in schools. And in that moment, it was just that, again, what it means to provide a resource, what it means to provide context, how do we see ourselves in this thing, was a really, really powerful moment for me to say that this is, like outside of the institution, or outside, that there is work that's being done to bring us and to have us represented. And I think in a way, there are so many gaps. There are so many gaps. There are so many voices. There is still so much missing from what's in front of us, that I think how we go about doing that work right now and what we draw from. Yeah, I mean, it's good days and bad days, really, but what does it mean? What does it mean to have a fuller picture available? I mean, sorry, that was, I was just responding to that text. But yeah, what from School of Commons, I mean, it's, that we need to try and remain responsive. I think that's what's meant that we've been able to sustain and hold the space and to contain the space a little bit. I mean, sort of, how do we hold space together? And are we asking what the wishes are? Are we asking what the needs are? Yeah, does that start to answer the question?
Definitely. It absolutely helps us to frame it, to understand, I think the hows are the questions that plague us perhaps the most once we begin to ask, once we've learned to ask and answer the what are we learning? How do we learn it? Becomes the next question. What does a school look like, to how do we run a school? How do we sustain it? Very important ones.
How are we doing it together? I mean, I think just to go back to what
Yeah.
Rachel was saying, at the beginning, how are we doing? How are we actually doing together? I think Cassie had shared this in our assembly earlier this year. Like, start with what the wishes are. Like what are our wishes for this thing before we move into the how. And that's something that's really stayed with me, is that, like what is it that I'm like what is my wish for this? What is my need for this? And to be able to draw from that.
Especially as a self-organized school in the second half, it actually asks interesting questions too, around like what if the counter school becomes another school to counter against, where the participants of the counterculture want to counteract against the counterculture. And it becomes this echo of many folks rebelling against the systems that have been created in rebellion against perhaps these legacy ones originally.
Absolutely. I mean, I think also
yeah.
just that, and another really like important reminder during our gathering was to build the structure, and there's balance, but there's also tension, and that's also important, in being able to hold it, and being able to hold it, to sort of, yeah. Anyway, I'm aware of time.
Peter, we can pass to you in the classical format, but also if folks want to chime in at different points, you're welcome to as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think I'll choose to take this question in the key of like sustaining the community of the school, because we could have a conversation about like how to get the money right now. And that is an enabling, a very important enabling question. Um, and I don't think necessarily the most interesting one, at least for me in this moment. But yeah, so much of the work that I've done as the program director, so I like oversee programming, is just answering the simple question of how to get people like out of their New York apartments and into shared space with other people. Um, and I think like an example of this is instructive. We early on in the school's development, in let's say late 2023, we had seminars and we had our attention lab workshops. Seminars are pretty elaborate to plan. Our workshops require a big space in the New York City real estate market that basically required that I call up people and basically beg them to let us use their big, beautiful space, which is a lot of work as well. And so I was casting about for a structure that would allow us to keep people showing up, because folks came to our initial events. They were really interested. They wanted to make this a community of their own. They didn't want to come back to the same workshop 3 times, and they didn't want to do multiple seminars because it was a big commitment. So what we came up with is a thing that we call sidewalk study. I'll share a link for this. It's a kind of form for being together. And the structure is really simple. You meet up at one spot out in the city at a bar or a cafe or a park. We hand out a single piece of paper that has text front and back, whatever text the facilitators choose. Folks read it together in a bunch of different ways. And then we hand out a paper map to a second location and a card that comes out of the kind of like performance score, Fluxus, Yoko Ono tradition, with a practice of attention on it, instructions for an attentional activity to do with the partner. People go out onto the street, they can take whatever route they like to the second spot, and they do that practice of attention out in the world. And then they meet up at the second spot, order a beer or whatever, and we talk about it. That has proven to be a really, really, really mutable, flexible, and fun way to keep people hanging out together. We've done about 110 of them right now, all unique. We've done them on all sorts of texts. You can click around the archive that I'll send. And I bring that up because it is it's a very cool structure. In retrospect, it feels kind of inspired, like, whoa, how did you think of this? It seems so clever. But it came as the result, not of a like, let's invent a cool thing, but as the nearest at hand solution to a pretty mundane problem, which is how do we get people to keep showing up in ways that aren't this like prohibitive logistical lift? Um, and I've found that so much of the school of building something and growing a community and kind of deepening a community is about finding ways to keep getting out of the space, getting out into the world more and more. So I dropped a thing in the chat earlier that was a reflection on we did a day in August where we were going to study the relationship between walking and thinking. Walking is an intellectual activity. So we had readings from James Baldwin, Guy Debord, Rebecca Solnit, Virginia Woolf, sent them out in advance, and then gathered a group of 20 people. We met in downtown Brooklyn, crossed the bridge, and walked 13 miles to the top of Manhattan. And we're talking about these readings and walking, so we're walking and thinking, hey. And that was an effort to get the school out of the school and into the world. And that has proven to be a way that it's that sort of movement ever outward that keeps people coming inward in this kind of funny way. And so we found that in terms of sustaining the community, that sort of creative, always hopping over the edges that you've already created for yourself has been a cool way it creates a sort of like churning that brings folks in and like kind of keeps them there and enriches their experience. So that's what came to mind on that question, how to sustain the community.
I love this idea of, it makes me think of how I would respond if I were reading Beauvoir and had to walk from the edge of Manhattan, at the edge of Brooklyn to the top of Manhattan, how that would affect how I would engage with these thinkers while moving my body. And I think that especially sits so hard after a period of pandemic Zoom time, where so much of our lack of movement also enabled us geographically, enabled us to connect globally, but also meant that we weren't moving our bodies in the same way. And also, as someone that recently led a walking tour through internet infrastructure, it really, it firsthand made me think about, how can we learn through movement, and what can movement, um, yeah, help us to learn, but of course also help to bring folks back uh, into, for example, the school when, there is so much logistical lift. When I love that phrasing as well. When it oftentimes like meeting people as they are, and I was kind of reading through a really interesting exchange in the chat, can also mean how can we create the lowest barrier for entry, but also how can that next kind of level of engaging people with their bodies then be the mechanism through which they're able to come back. Because sometimes maybe in the process of meeting people where they are, how do you enable them to come back again and again and again? A very difficult tension, I think. And I'd be curious what other folks think as well. Mark, I'll pass to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think when you asked this question, uh, two things came to mind. One being how the school is funded, which is part, briefly just that it's funded 45% of the income. It's on our website. You can find it there. It's 45% of the income comes from the ministry, and the rest comes from a variety of sources, but mostly from also the fees of participants. So you pay to join the school, and that fee goes. It's not. There's nothing added on to that. That's all for the living and eating, the food that is available, and being involved in workshops and various things like that. And that helps the school to survive. And I think also something that we're always working to find ways of producing or adding to. And the way that those fees are generally come to the participants from a variety of sources, depending a lot upon where in the world they're coming from, maybe the education systems they're coming from, or other support structures. But then the other thing that I think really struck with me is how do we sustain the school fits very much in, terms of the energy to do it. And not least because I think we were visited by the principal of Folk High School in Denmark, Brambjerg Folk High School, who felt that one of his comments around the school was how much energy it takes to keep structure away from the day-to-day runnings of the institution, the organization, or of what we're doing. And there's a huge amount of energy it takes. And participants are living here in the town. This is a town of around 660 people. And the school at each time is about 25 people. So that's a big dynamic shift in the town. But it's also that they're here from various different places in Iceland and beyond. And so there's a huge amount of care work that goes into sustaining the school. And the where we get the energy from is in part because I think of our resistance to those educational structures we were talking about earlier, that we're doing something that we feel is closer to an act of art making or closer to an act of school making that we haven't found the ability to do somewhere else. So the energy it's easier to spend time and effort doing things here than it would be in institutions perhaps that we've come from. But also the dynamic of the sustaining of energy changes. Some of us who are part of the school live here in Seyðisfjörður, myself, for example, but some of the program directors who are involved in the school come only for the duration of the program, and they will do one program a year. And so each program would be run by a different combination of program directors. And then they will leave Seyðisfjörður, return to their homes elsewhere around the world and their practices elsewhere, which will it kind of feeds the school by rejuvenating outside of those programs, if that makes sense. We're all bound to this commitment that we're practicing artists, that we know what we're doing, that we're making things. We're not away from our practice through being part of the school. And that helps to sustain, I think, the amount of energy it takes to run projects like this. And also, it's part of the importance is around that sustaining of energy is the ability to refuse. There is no obligations in terms of being in the school, and to be able to refuse as an act of self-care is an important part of, I think, the environment of what we're doing. And sometimes that also is the refusal of people who might have families or other commitments that that the school needs to make way for. So that's an important part of it as well. So there's two things that were in my head. Of course, yes, sustaining the school is a lot is complicated, but those, I think those are the two things that really sprang to mind.
Super interesting, Mark. I think again, this thinking about the energy that it takes to actually be a counterweight to these systems. We don't actually think about how much energy that takes, how much energy it takes to keep those structures out, I think is a really important and provocative one. That reminds me of a lot of like work and thinking that's been done around third spaces and the role of third spaces in sustaining a community. So places outside of the space of work, outside of the space of home, where folks are able to meet and learn together. But I can imagine, and I wonder how something like funding or university association or all of these kinds of things might affect your relationship to what is a third space for others. So who takes care of those that create that third space? Of course. But I'll pass on to Rachel and of course to Benjamin. And then we're already almost to the bottom of the hour, which means we'll have to close afterwards, which is remarkable to see how quickly the time has passed.
Yeah, it passes way too quickly. It's so crazy. Well, I guess I would start by saying that at the beginning when I started School of Machines, I had no money. I mean, we could say I still have no money, so not much has changed. But like the point is that, at the time, I think I started to get more into technology around the time of hackathons, like 2012 or something like this. And a lot of people were like, had these big ideas for big things where they're like, oh, I can't do it, I have no funding, and I was just like, okay, then don't think that's a barrier, like find a way. So then the idea was like funding things through student fees. And so that's basically the model that we have. And I think part of the issue is also I am coming from an anti-capitalist background. So then, the idea of charging a lot of money is very painful. And I feel like I feel like we're on the kind of low end, although I guess it depending on where you're like who's looking or whatever. But yeah, so that's a struggle. Money is a struggle. I will just be honest. Like I think that also one of the things is like well, at least for myself and like some of you, like I started this as my art, I think, like looking back, reflecting, it's like, this is my art. And artists are not marketers. And as you know, I mean, what I mean? Like the artists, we need marketers, actually. Artists, I feel like we should just pair every artist with a marketer and like see what magic can happen. But like, I think this is also part of the problem is that we don't know how to promote. I mean, I'm working in this artist run space, and I talked to the manager of it, and he's in the same space. I mean, he's in charge of a huge building of all these different creative people, like working from radio to theater and cinema and blah, blah, blah. And he doesn't have a clue how to earn money and to promote and all these things. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think there's also the reality of that like, or the struggle is real, just to say. And like, so, I would love for people to, donate money so we can do magical things. That would be like one of the needs. Or also help with promotion, because like, I mean, I often do this. I exchange promotion help for a free class or something like that, because like, I just like any way I can try to like do the alternative, what do you call this? Alternative financial, like this, like,
Barter?
what is it? Bartering. Yes, thank you. Exactly. So I feel like that, I mean, I really try to do those kinds of things and like have mutually beneficial support systems, but I could always use more. So like, if you're interested in any of these things, or like people telling their friends, because I think it's interesting with artists, because I often say like, I think we have people who are artists who want to learn technology and tech people who want to be creative. And but like artists don't want to tell you what their magic secret is, even if it was like, I learned how to do this thing in this great class. you know, they just want to be like, look at the cool thing I did, you know? So it's like also even there, like, it's just always, yeah, everything is like bigger. It's just like so many issues, so many issues. I mean, if we could have like, yeah, like a working group after this, you know, so it's not just like a conversation, but like, okay, let's start working through all these things, because I definitely think, I mean, I've dedicated my life to humans, to artists, to technology, to like questioning everything, you know, and like all my money now is going to the collective space. Every month I earn money and I'm like, no, I'm it's for the collective. And like, so like I'm not the person who knows how to sustain financially at all, but I would love your help, dear humans, on this call, and any organizations you're a part of. I would definitely like appreciate that kind of support. And yeah, I think that's kind of the thing. I mean, I'm doing this for the love, and because I can't do anything else, I don't even know what else I would want to do. I feel like the way in is like humans and supporting humans and to create all the big things that we need. Like, you know, even the, you know, this whole thing with the frogs in Portland, you know, like that is like artists are going to save us, you know. And so like we just need more support for the people who are willing to dedicate their lives to make that happen. Thank you.
Yeah, big up to all of that. I think you have to be a bit crazy to do this stuff, or not planning too much. I think I kind of participated in the Glitch Art Festival kind of thing in Chicago in the early 2010s, and I learned a lot from them in not organizing too much and not planning too much. So then you just let things happen and see how that goes. And it kind of worked. I did an entire festival where we had no schedule, no program. We just every morning say, okay, who's going to do what today? And we just had a space. And for me, yeah, setting up the space and the conditions and the tools is more important than the rest. And I think it's also really possible because Dasha and I work really well together, and we do maybe like 2 or 3 meetings before we do no school in the entire year. I hate meetings, so I don't do any. We don't do Q&A. We don't do a lot of things during no school that are annoying in this kind of events. So we save a lot of time on that. The first year, I invited all my friends or artist friends. I thought they would say no, at least some of them. I ended up with 30 teachers for 90 participants. So it cost me like $4,000 of my own money. But since then, I'm a bit more careful. We reduced on the number of guests, but it's always more than we should. But I think, yeah, we do it for the love. We do it because it's not a job. We don't feel like, I think the day becomes like boring or like I feel like I'm repeating myself, I'll stop. But for now, it's not. We've been kicked out of our space every 3 years, so we are being kept busy and not bored. And I think we need more of this in society generally. Like people do things not for their interest. Then on the practical side, working for this American university, I knew that there was a research budget that people can tap into. So I kind of based the cost on that. A lot of people we have actually get funded. We also got some funding, which allowed us to take people for free, to also bring a bit more diversity in the kind of audience and not just being white dude with beards. Sorry for the white dude with beard, but you know what I mean. And that was something that I think, yeah, I wish it could be free and I could do it like that, but we are not able to for now, at least. And yeah, I think I get as much as I give, and I think we all do. It's exhausting after 2 weeks of being with so many people and doing so much stuff. I need like to sleep for a week and not talk so much. But for the year, you unpack all these experiences, and it's like super enriching. And I think that's more than any kind of payment you can imagine. And I think it's the same for a lot of people. And we have similar kind of artists who want to do more tech people who want to do more interesting stuff. So those people have a bit more money, which helps, I think, everybody else. And yeah, that's kind of a balance that works like that. And yeah, for now it's not boring. So I think that's the key for me.
Thanks so much. Gosh, I know we are just at the bottom of the hour, and as folks know, we'd originally planned to have a kind of open Q&A session, but honestly, we had so much to talk about between all of us that we'll be closing the call right afterwards. I know that we have some questions that folks have been asking our wonderful speakers in the pad. We'll make sure to pass those on. But for now, as we start the round of closing, I know Peter has to jump off right at the end of the call, so we'll pass to him first before passing to Chantel, and then go in the same order as before. But really, just to close, really is just to ask you all, why do you do this work? Why do you organize? What keeps you energized? How do you maintain that energy after, bringing folks into a room for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then having to sleep for weeks afterwards to maintain that energy? What keeps you sustaining your schools? Peter.
Wow, great question. And thank you. I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to say something and then I have to drop off. What keeps me doing this? I mean, I think I always felt that there was a certain kind of educational community that was possible at the nexus where people could be like, intellectual and also bring their creativity and also political engagement and also kind of inhabit their full personhood in a way that didn't leave meaning it at the door. And so what gets me up in the morning is creating that space. And I think in the absence of in a kind of like what you might call a disenchanted world, like schools are a unique kind of space that can make sacred experience with other people. And at its best, I think studying together and asking questions together can create that kind of experience, which we so desperately need. And that's so important. And I guess my parting words is just like higher education right now is obviously doing some serious soul searching, the federal government in the US, but also just like the advent of AI is making the future of those institutions really uncertain. And I think that small schools like ours at this moment in history, whether we like it or not, are stepping into a kind of protagonist role. I think we really are carrying on the torch in certain ways. And it feels really, really important to me that we be in relationship with each other and have kind of a conscious shared identity about what the hell we're doing, because I think we all are on the same side and working together, even if we're in Berlin or Brooklyn or whatever. And so thank you, Anne, for bringing us all together. I hope that these conversations can continue because like we are all on the same team here and we had better know it and we had better kind of work together. And so it was really great pleasure to meet y'all. And let's please keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for gathering us.
Thanks so much, Peter. Chantel, on to you.
I don't think I've got a choice anymore. When I think about, real work or the other world or I it makes me sick. It makes me upset. It makes me, it's draining and it's exhausting and it's extractive. And I think all the reason I feel that, yeah, the veil has been lifted, and the structures and the systems are very clear now. And I think that I don't have a choice but to place my energy where I feel cared for, where I feel respected, where I feel valued, where there is time and effort spent on deepening knowledge and expanding on knowledge and, and sharing that knowledge. And yeah, it feels extremely urgent and it feels very vulnerable. And I feel that every time I come into, I mean, I have somebody on the call that has kind of brought me back to life, through conversations and just time spent thinking through the realities that we're facing right now and being reassured that there are ways to do things differently, and that this work is important. And I crave it. I think, yeah, I think I'm at a point now where I've spent a lot of time in a different environment, work environment, and I think I've kind of just about recovered from the burnout. So yeah, this feels like my life's work, and I deeply believe in it. I really do deeply believe in the power of the collective. So yeah.
I can sense that. I feel like with everyone, every answer, everyone can like believe with and empathize with everything that you've said, Chantal. And to not have a choice means that we're, many ways, all of us don't have a choice. We're all in it together. Mark, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, and I'd like to follow that actually with that what you said, Chantal, about being cared for and caring for. I think is really resonating. I think I suppose there's the reason that I do this work originally, and then the reason that came a bit later. And the reason that I did it originally was I think I was really feeling that there was something abusive in higher education institutions in which I was working in terms of the promises being made to students and what the institution was able to provide. And I think teachers, the lecturers, and researchers sometimes got caught within those two extremes, and in some cases made for incredibly unhealthy working environments. And so I think, I mean, that got me thinking originally around alternative educational structures, and that's how I kind of came across and ended up getting involved in LungA School. And also, it's an ongoing reminder to try and do things differently. But I think that so there was that really makes it work for me. That was what drew me here and made it clear that I was making the right decision. But then being part of a school where the people who live in the town are so generous with what the school does and providing spaces, making uh, interacting with the school, being part of the school, and the participants in the school then becoming part of the town in small ways, joining the local yoga class, for example, or providing exhibitions at times of the year when otherwise a remote school in the east of Iceland might be might otherwise feel completely closed, particularly when there's no more sunlight for several months. And so there's a kind of there's a real sense of care. So being cared for, just following from what Chantal said, being cared for and being able to care for something, an idea which is about knowledge and about art making and about interacting with each other is just something that's too good not to do. So that's, I think, probably the summary of why I'm here.
I feel like when I grabbed the mic back from you all to just echo what you're saying, I feel like the care aspect, of course, is a part of all of the work that we all do. And again, maybe a question for afterwards is who cares for the carers? How do you recover from that act of holding space for other folks? Especially, of course, in the east of Iceland when there is no sun for months on end. How can your vitamin D lamp help you to care for yourself? Just kidding.
Yeah, it's cod liver oil mainly.
Um, Rachel, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I've been saying why I care, like why I'm doing this the whole time I've been speaking. So like I don't know how much I can really add here, but I think for me it's, you know, at first I was like excited about technology and excited about getting more women in technology and more like, you know, people of color, people from other cultures that are not like white Western males, and specifically. And now we see much more of that here, although people in other countries, like in Eastern Europe and other places, tell me like it's still a problem where they are. So like there's still a lot of work to be done. But I think part of it, it's like, as we see the world is heading in a very monotonous one, you know, kind of human thriving direction. And that is just not, it's not the way we humans should be evolving. So I feel like this is also why doing what I do is I mean, this is the kind of thing that like keeps me going, is like connecting humans, bringing them together, because you know, every day, you know, it's like every day is something. You can't look at the news and just be like not heartbroken every single day. And for this, you need other humans to kind of talk about and share the pain and share the confusion and the like, we need that kind of solidarity just to survive. I don't even think it's possible to do alone. I think people who try are probably really suffering. So so yeah, it's, I think, bringing humans together, and also like seeing people get out all, because you know, like nobody I mean, I don't know. I think free therapy for everybody as well. This is another mission statement I would like to put out there if anyone wants to help with that idea. Because I see that, like, you know, just giving people space to empty themselves of all of the things they're holding on to, whether it's from last night or like year 5 or whatever, you know, it's like we're all holding on to some things that we need to let go of, and like to give people that space and see the light bulbs go off and the relief from having someone witness and see you for like all the things that you've experienced is so it's like a miracle. And I feel like, so in my mind, I think I'm here for this. I'm here to contribute to, like, yeah, the human evolution, my evolution, like I said. And yeah, and you yeah, you do that without money. And like, and yeah, but it's like at some point you would like to think that like everything is just really going to match, you know, but I don't, the world is too confusing. I'm confused right now. Even so, but yeah, like relying on each other is kind of the only way, I think.
Totally. Gosh, again, interconnected, relational. Ultimately, you can't go at it alone. Um, of course, free therapy for everyone sounds like the thing that we absolutely all do need, on top of course, freedom, justice, equity, and all of this that we all aim to work towards. Benjamin, I'll pass it to you to close us off.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my practice deal with care, repair, hacking, and recycling. So I think there's definitely a connection there. I've also noticed through the years that a lot of people go through life-changing experience, and maybe no school is a small part of it. So we had few people quitting the job, changing completely path after. I also actually started therapy. I quit drinking. I guess doing this job helped me go to also there was a lot too much partying going on the first few years, and I kind of needed to change that. But anyway, it's off topic. But yeah, I think one aspect that I should really mention is my wife, who has a job and is able to help me sustain this, is very key to the ability of even doing any of that. We lost a mother who I was very close to, and we ended up with a house that we bought for her in this small town. And that kind of, school was born also to like trying to make sense of this and trying to make something with that space. So we have like 20 people sleeping in a house, and it's like became, bringing life to this environment. And I think we don't do any online activity at all. We actually refuse any video, any chat. We don't record anything. It's really about being together in the moment. And I think that's what make it so exciting. And it's also nice to be doing Zoom calls like that. But I just feel like for all the people there, I think there's a thing of like, not being on your phone, just being together. And I think this is so much good vibe that, yeah, I feel like I could do. That's what I think sustain it so much. So much. It's yeah, it's very exciting.
You. Thank you so much. And thank you all so much for joining today. Gosh, there's so many threads to follow up on. And if this call is any indication, it's that there's a need to have these shared spaces to discuss tactics, approaches, reasons why. And it feels like such a nourishing and important um, thing, a privilege to be able to listen to you all and to be in this shared space together. I feel energized in thinking about how we might build better structures and in the process build a better world. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your day for listening. Thank you so much to folks that have stuck around to the very end. We've gone radically over time, but I suppose that's what happens when you have so much to say and so much more to say in turn. Thank you all so much, and hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. And check out more of the Anti-University Festival. And see you all somewhere in digital physical space.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, thank you very much.